There's a voice in the back of your head that whispers, "Don't," right before you do something stupid. This is a tribute to 10 people who apparently never had that voice. What you're about to see isn't a series of unfortunate accidents. It's a highlight reel of humanity's most spectacular brain glitches, moments where common sense was not just ignored, but actively fought against. Prepare yourself. 1. Have you ever gotten into an argument so intense, so fundamentally important, that you were willing to bet your life on it? Not figuratively, but literally? Well, allow me to introduce you to two gentlemen from Pakistan who elevated a simple disagreement over a game of cricket into a masterclass in mutually assured destruction. The stage was a dusty field, the air thick with the tension of competition. The issue at hand. One man, let's call him Farouk, accused the other, Khalid, of cheating. A grave accusation, to be sure. This wasn't just about a game. This was about honor, pride, and the sacred rules of sportsmanship. A normal dispute might end in shouting, maybe some light shoving, or at worst, a refusal to share tea later. But Farouk and Khalid were not normal men. They were pioneers of conflict resolution, operating on a level of petty arrogance that defied all logic. They needed a way to settle this that was definitive, final, and monumentally stupid. A fistfight was too common. A rematch was out of the question, as the trust was broken. No, they needed something with real stakes. And in a moment of brain-dead inspiration that future generations will study in disbelief, they landed on the perfect solution. A duel. Not with pistols at dawn, that's far too civilized. They chose a method that was more personal, more intimate, and infinitely more insane. They agreed to a duel with live venomous scorpions. Now, a quick lesson in zoology for the uninitiated. The scorpions in that particular region aren't the kind of thing you poke with a stick for fun. They are basically nature's angry little hypodermic needles, packed with a neurotoxin cocktail that tells your central nervous system to shut down immediately. Knowing this, our two heroes went out and procured their weapons. The rules of their idiotic engagement were simple. Each man would hold a scorpion, and the first one to get stung would be declared the loser, and by extension, the cheater. It was a test of will, a test of bravery, and a complete failure of the human instinct for self-preservation. With a small crowd of bewildered friends watching, they stood face to face, arachnids in hand. The tension was palpable. Who would flinch? Who would be proven the victor? The answer, as it turns out, was neither of them. In their adrenaline-fueled standoff, both men were stung at almost the exact same moment. There was a brief, shared look of surprise, a flicker of, maybe this wasn't my best idea, before the venom began its grim work. They both collapsed, their bodies convulsing as the poison took over. Both died. They had successfully settled their argument by proving, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they were both equally, fatally, moronic. The question of who cheated at cricket was never answered, but they did leave behind a timeless legacy. In the ultimate contest of pride versus common sense, pride will win the battle, but common sense is the one that gets to go home afterward. 2. Welcome to the serene suburbs of Illinois, a place of manicured lawns, friendly neighbors, and a simmering, low-grade war between man and nature. Our protagonist, a homeowner we'll call Bob, had a problem. A simple problem. A raccoon, a creature with the moral compass of a pirate and the dexterity of a tiny, furry safecracker, was raiding his bird feeder. A lesser man might have bought a raccoon-proof feeder, or maybe tried a humane trap, or even just accepted the loss of a few dollars in birdseed as the price of living near wildlife. But Bob was not a lesser man. Bob was an inventor, a DIY visionary who saw this not as an inconvenience, but as an opportunity to build a monument to his own over-engineering genius. His solution was anything but simple. In the sacred laboratory of his garage, he constructed a device that belonged more in a Wile E. Coyote cartoon than a backyard. He engineered an elaborate net-launching trap, a masterpiece of unnecessary complexity. The trigger? A tripwire. The launch mechanism? The explosive force of a blank shotgun shell. Yes, you heard that right. Bob decided that the appropriate response to a 10-pound mammal stealing sunflower seeds was munitions-grade pest control. He spent an entire evening setting up his contraption, tweaking the angles, testing the tension on the wire, feeling the immense satisfaction of a man who has brought a cannon to a knife fight. He went to bed that night, dreaming of the perfect thwump of a net ensnaring his furry nemesis. The next morning, however, Bob's short-term memory decided to take an unscheduled vacation. He woke up, had his coffee, and looked out the window. The bird feeder's looking a bit low, he probably thought, his mind completely scrubbed clean of the military-grade snare he had deployed just hours earlier. With the cheerful obliviousness of a man walking into his own ambush, he strolled out into the crisp morning air, heading directly for the feeder. His foot snagged on something thin and taut. For a split second, a forgotten memory may have tried to surface, but it was too late. An earth-shattering boom ripped through the morning calm, and Bob was instantly and violently embraced by his own creation. The high-velocity net wrapped around him with the force of a linebacker's tackle, lifting him off his feet. His trajectory was perfect, his execution flawless. Unfortunately, the target was not a raccoon, and the landing zone was not a soft patch of grass. Bob was launched backward, his flight path intersecting perfectly with a heavy stone birdbath, the very object whose occupants he was trying to protect. The impact was brutally effective, ending Bob's career as a pest control engineer and proving once and for all that the most dangerous animal in the suburbs isn't the one with the mask and striped tail, but the one with a toolbox and a really, really bad idea. The raccoon, presumably, watched the entire thing from a nearby branch before calmly descending to enjoy a well-earned breakfast. 3. What is the true cost of a case of beer? For most of us, it's about $20 and maybe a slight hangover. For our next contestant in the great human experiment, the price was significantly steeper. Our story begins in a brightly lit convenience store, a cathedral of late-night cravings and questionable decisions. Meet our protagonist, a man whose ambition for free alcohol far exceeded his intellectual horsepower. Let's call him Dave. Dave's plan was a model of simplicity. Walk in, grab a case of beer, and walk out. The critical flaw was in that last step. After successfully securing the merchandise from the cooler, he made a bold dash for the exit, only to be confronted by the final boss of any low-level heist. The store clerk, a man paid just enough to care. The clerk's simple, "Hey," was all it took to shatter Dave's fragile composure. His brain, already operating on limited resources, immediately hit the panic button, flushing all rational thought out of the system. The mission instantly changed from acquire beer to escape at all costs. He saw the glass doors, the gateway to freedom shimmering under the fluorescent lights. His mind, now a screaming vortex of adrenaline and bad choices, made a fatal calculation. It saw the clear night sky through the door and concluded that the door must therefore be an open portal. For those of you unfamiliar with the basic principles of solid matter, a quick physics lesson. Glass, while transparent, is remarkably solid. It is specifically designed to prevent things, such as the elements and aspiring thieves, from passing through it. Dave, however, was not in a state to appreciate the marvels of modern engineering. He lowered his head, clutched the beer case to his chest like a running back heading for the end zone, and sprinted. It was a magnificent, desperate, and tragically short-lived burst of speed. He didn't try to open the door. He didn't even slow down. He ran headfirst into the thick, unyielding pane of tempered glass with the full force of a panicked man. The impact was not the comical bonk you see in cartoons. It was a sickening final thud that echoed through the quiet store. The unmoving glass met the unstoppable idiot, and the glass won. The force of the collision snapped his neck instantly, dropping him to the floor in a heap. The case of beer he was so desperate to liberate tumbled from his grasp, the cans scattering across the linoleum floor, some of them bursting and fizzing around the man who had just paid the ultimate price for them. He never made it out with the beer, but he did make a permanent and very messy impression. The security footage likely serves as a grimly effective training video for employees on how some problems, quite literally, solve themselves. 4. Let's take a dive into the murky world of underwater economics. where two brothers decided to start a high-risk, low-overhead business in illegal salvage. Their venture capital was a cutting torch, their business plan was grab shiny things, and their office was a shipwreck resting silently on the seabed. This wasn't some grand treasure hunt for pirate gold. This was the gritty, blue-collar work of carving up a metal carcass for scrap copper. Let's call our entrepreneurs Marco and Paolo. Their collective genius had led them to a particularly promising section of the hull, well below the waterline. The job was simple: use their high-temperature cutting torches to slice off valuable copper plating. As the torches hissed and roared, turning the cold, dark water into a bubbling cauldron, they were the very picture of industriousness. There was just one tiny, insignificant detail they had overlooked in their pre-work safety assessment, which likely consisted of a shrug and a "what's the worst that could happen?" They were working directly underneath the ship's massive, multi-ton anchor, which was hanging precariously from a rusted, decrepit chain. Now, for anyone who needs a quick refresher on high school physics, let's go over some basic principles. Principle 1. A cutting torch is designed to make metal very, very hot. Principle 2. Rusted, old metal, when made very, very hot, loses what little structural integrity it has left. And Principle 3. The big one. Gravity is a relentless, unforgiving force that loves nothing more than to pull very heavy things downward with extreme prejudice. The anchor chain, which had been stoically resisting decay for decades, was not designed to withstand a direct, sustained blast of 3,000-degree heat from below. As Marco and Paolo worked, consumed by the thought of the payday that awaited them, the heat from their torches was traveling up the anchor chain, link by agonizing link. It was a silent countdown they had initiated themselves. The rusted metal began to glow, to groan, to stretch. They probably never even noticed. The sound was likely lost in the hiss of their own equipment. Then, with a final, tired sigh, the weakened chain gave up. It snapped. But this wasn't a dramatic, movie-style explosion. Down in the dense, sound-dampening world of the deep, the multi-ton anchor began its descent with a ghostly silence. There was no warning scream of twisting metal, no time to react. It was just a sudden, all-encompassing shadow that fell upon them. One moment they were industrious salvagers, and the next they were a permanent, two-dimensional addition to the shipwreck's hull. The very object designed to hold the ship firmly in place had become the instrument of their final, crushing end. When authorities eventually investigated the site, they found the brothers' work was, in a way, complete. They had successfully liberated the copper, but in the process, they had become part of the very wreckage they were plundering. A grim, flattened testament to the fact that sometimes the quickest way to get rich is a direct path to the ocean floor. 5. Welcome to Australia, the continent designed by a committee of things that want to kill you. It's a place where even the cutest, most colorful creatures are often just cleverly disguised delivery systems for lethal venom. This brings us to our next honoree, a young woman whose quest for the perfect social media post led her to ignore every single warning sign that nature could possibly throw at her. Let's call her Jessica. Jessica was on what she likely hashtagged as an inauthentic adventure, exploring a coastal tide pool. Her worldview, it seems, was filtered entirely through her smartphone camera. Everything was a potential photo op, a backdrop, a prop to enhance her online brand. In one of these pools, she spotted it. A tiny, almost jewel-like octopus, pulsating with vibrant, iridescent blue rings. To a rational mind with a basic survival instinct, such a flamboyant display in the animal kingdom is a universal sign for "I am extravagantly dangerous, please stay away." But Jessica's brain didn't see a warning. It saw content. Her internal monologue wasn't one of caution, but of curation. OMG, the colors! This is amazing! This will get so many likes! She was completely unaware that she was admiring one of the planet's most venomous animals, the blue-ringed octopus. Now, let's do a quick biological deep dive. The blue-ringed octopus possesses a potent neurotoxin for which there is no antivenom. Its bite is often completely painless, a tiny, almost unnoticeable prick. The rings themselves only flash their brilliant blue when the animal feels threatened, which is the octopus equivalent of screaming, "You are making a terrible mistake." Jessica, blissfully ignorant, interpreted this death scream as a personal invitation for a photo shoot. She reached into the water and gently scooped up the tiny agent of death. It was so small, so beautiful. She placed it on her forearm, the perfect spot for a selfie. She held up her phone, struck a pose, a bright smile, the scenic ocean in the background, and the deadly little creature sitting calmly on her skin. She probably took a dozen photos trying to find the perfect angle. At some point during this process, the octopus did what threatened octopuses do. It delivered its tiny, painless, and utterly fatal bite. Jessica felt nothing. She admired her handiwork on the screen, thrilled with the result. She had captured the perfect moment. Having secured the shot, she gently placed the octopus back in the water and started to walk away, probably already thinking about what filter to use. But then, a strange tingling started in her lips and fingers. Her vision began to blur. A sudden numbness spread through her limbs. The connection between her brain and her muscles was being systematically severed by the toxin. The terrifying realization of what had happened dawned on her far too late. She collapsed on the sand, unable to move, unable to breathe, her respiratory system shutting down completely. She had successfully captured an image of her own killer, a vibrant, beautiful photo that would serve as the final, ironic entry in her digital life. Her quest for likes had ended with a permanent log-off, proving that in the land down under, nature always gets the last laugh. 6. What is art? Is it a profound expression of the human condition? Or is it an excuse to do something profoundly stupid and call it culture? For our next subject, an Italian performance artist we'll name Lorenzo, the line between the two was not just blurry, it was non-existent. Lorenzo was a man who didn't just want to create art, he wanted to be art. His latest concept was a bold statement on the symbiotic relationship between man and nature. His plan was simple, elegant, and breathtakingly idiotic. He would cover his entire body in honey and lie down on a large, thriving anthill, thereby achieving a state of interspecies communion. He wasn't just feeding ants, he was making a statement. A sticky, ill-advised statement. To prepare for his masterpiece, he procured a large vat of organic honey, only the best for his six-legged co-stars. He found the perfect location, a massive, bustling ant colony, a veritable metropolis of insectoid activity. He likely explained his vision to his friends, who probably responded with a chorus of, "Are you insane?" But Lorenzo was an artiste. He saw their concerns not as valid warnings, but as the pathetic whining of uninspired minds who couldn't grasp his genius. The day of the performance arrived. With the solemnity of a high priest, Lorenzo disrobed and began the ritual of anointing himself with the golden viscous honey. Once thoroughly coated, he approached the anthill and gently laid his body down upon it, adopting a pose of serene contemplation. He was ready to commune. And the ants? Well, they were ready to feast. For them, this wasn't a profound artistic gesture. It was the single greatest day in the history of their colony. A god had descended from the heavens and offered himself as an all-you-can-eat buffet. They swarmed him by the thousands, a living carpet of tiny, biting, and very appreciative critics. But the real drama was happening on a microscopic level. You see, Lorenzo's grand artistic vision had failed to account for a small biological footnote. He had a severe, undiagnosed, and spectacularly aggressive allergy to formic acid, the primary chemical in ant venom. What he expected to be a transcendent experience of tickling and nibbling quickly turned into a biological declaration of war. As thousands of ants bit him, his body's immune system didn't just react, it went completely berserk. He went into full-blown anaphylactic shock. His skin erupted in hives, his throat began to swell, and his airway started to close. The serene artist's expression contorted into one of pure, wide-eyed panic. His profound attempt to connect with the natural world was a catastrophic success. Nature connected with him so thoroughly that it shut his body down with terrifying efficiency. His performance piece, intended to be a long, meditative work, had a shockingly abrupt and breathless finale. When the authorities were finally called to the scene, they weren't sure if they had found a victim or a very strange, failed picnic. Lorenzo had achieved a form of immortality, just not the one he wanted. He became a cautionary tale, a legend in the art world for all the wrong reasons, proving that the line between being an artist and being food is sometimes just a layer of honey. 7. Let's journey to the heartland of America, specifically a nondescript basement in Illinois, a place where boredom and bad ideas often breed. It was here that two friends, we'll call them Gary and Kevin, were engaged in a time-honored tradition, doing absolutely nothing of value. But on this fateful day, they decided to spice up their monotony with a game, a very, very stupid game. The centerpiece of this activity was a loaded handgun. Now, there are a few golden rules when it comes to firearms, taught to children and adults alike. Treat every gun as if it's loaded, never point it at something you aren't willing to destroy, and keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. These rules are not complex philosophical concepts. They are the bare minimum requirements to avoid a tragedy. Gary, the self-appointed comedian of the duo, viewed these rules less as life-saving mandates and more as optional guidelines for people who lacked his superior sense of control and humor. He decided it would be hilarious to play a little prank on Kevin. He picked up the gun, and with the confidence of a man who has never been wrong about anything in his life, he pointed it directly at his friend. Kevin, for his part, wasn't a victim in the traditional sense. He was a willing audience member in this theater of idiocy, laughing along. This was just Gary being Gary. Gary, aiming the barrel squarely at Kevin's chest, put on his most serious face and said the 6 most infamous last words in the Darwin Award's lexicon. "Don't worry, man, it's not loaded." He was so sure, so utterly convinced of this fact in his own mind, that he didn't even bother to check. Checking was for amateurs. He was a professional prankster. To really sell the joke to get that perfect jump scare reaction from Kevin, he pulled the trigger. In that tiny, compressed fraction of a second, Gary's entire understanding of reality was violently corrected by the laws of physics. The deafening crack that filled the room was not the empty click he was expecting. It was the sound of a primer igniting gunpowder, of a small metal projectile being launched at over 1,000 feet per second. The punchline of his joke was delivered with brutal, undeniable force right into his friend's chest. The look of comedic shock on Kevin's face was instantly replaced by one of final, irreversible surprise. Gary stood there, the smoking gun in his hand, his brain struggling to process the catastrophic failure of his own joke. He had successfully pranked his friend, just with a slightly more permanent result than anticipated. The fatal punchline wasn't the sound, or the recoil, but the chilling silence that followed. A silence that confirmed that when you gamble with a loaded gun, the house always wins. 8. Step into the Iron Temple, a gym late at night in Mexico. The air is thick with the scent of chalk, sweat, and unchecked ambition. This is the sanctuary of the bodybuilder, a place where mortal men attempt to sculpt themselves into gods. Our hero on this stage of Greek tragedy is a man we'll name Hector, a walking sculpture of muscle whose ego was his largest and most dangerous asset. Hector lived by a simple code: lift more. Every session was a battle against his previous self, and his ultimate goal was the mythical personal record, the holy grail of lifting. Tonight was the night he would conquer the bench press, to lift a weight so monumental it would echo through the hallowed halls of his local gym. He loaded the bar with a series of heavy plates, a weight that would make a forklift nervous. There was just one crucial element missing from this equation: a spotter. Now, for the uninitiated, a spotter is not just a training partner. They are your life insurance policy. They are the person who stands between you and being crushed by your own hubris. But in Hector's mind, asking for a spotter was like admitting you might fail. It was a sign of weakness, a crack in the armor of his Herculean self-image. He glanced around the nearly empty gym, saw a couple of potential helpers, and scoffed internally. He didn't need them. His spotter was his own raw power. He lay down on the bench, the overloaded bar looming over him like a guillotine. He wrapped his hands around the cold steel, took a deep, theatrical breath, and unracked the weight. The sheer force of it pressed down on him, a test of will and sinew. He lowered the bar slowly, controllably to his chest. The first half of the lift was complete. Now, for the hard part. He pushed. He drove with his legs, engaged his core, and commanded his pectoral muscles to explode with power. And for a moment, the bar moved. It rose an inch, then two. But gravity is a patient, undefeated champion. His muscles, pushed beyond their absolute limit, began to scream in protest. The bar stalled. His arms began to tremble violently. The look of supreme confidence on his face was replaced by a flash of pure, primal panic. He was trapped. The weight was too much. His muscles gave out completely. The bar didn't just fall, it crashed down with the full, unforgiving force of his vanity, landing directly across his neck. The impact was instant and absolute. Hector, the man who wanted to be the strongest in the gym, had been defeated by the very tools of his trade. He died not from a lack of strength, but from an overdose of pride, becoming a permanent grim reminder of the gym's #1 rule. Your ego is the heaviest weight of all, and you should never, ever lift it alone. 9. Welcome to the desperate, caffeine-fueled trenches of finals week. Our setting? A college dorm room, a chaotic shrine to procrastination littered with textbooks, pizza boxes, and the ghosts of forgotten lectures. In this academic war zone, we find our protagonist, a student named Kyle, who was about to wage a one-man chemical war against his own biology. Kyle had a simple philosophy. Why learn over a semester what you can cram in one night? He was a master of putting things off, and now, with his final exam looming just hours away, he was facing the consequences. But Kyle had a plan. A terrible, jittery, heart-pounding plan. He wasn't going to rely on memory or knowledge. He was going to rely on stimulants. His arsenal was laid out before him, a dozen cans of a high-octane energy drink and a bottle of caffeine pills. He was going to cheat sleep, cheat fatigue, and force-feed a semester's worth of information into his brain. For those keeping score at home, let's talk basic physiology. The human heart is a remarkable engine, but it's designed to run on a specific fuel, at a specific pace. What Kyle was about to do was akin to pouring rocket fuel into a lawnmower engine and flooring it. The night began. The first can went down, followed by a caffeine pill chaser. A surge of energy. It was working. He felt sharp, focused, a god of academia. He tore through his notes. A second can, then a third. With each new dose, he felt more and more invincible. The words on the page seemed to fly into his brain. But his body was sending out frantic warning signals that he was too wired to notice. His hands were shaking, his leg was bouncing uncontrollably, and his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird trying to escape. He wasn't just studying. He was redlining his entire cardiovascular system. By the time he was on his 10th or 11th can, mixing in pills with reckless abandon, he had transcended the realm of all-nighter and entered a state of pure, toxic stimulation. He reached for the final can, his victory lap. As he took the last swig, his heart, which had been valiantly trying to keep up with his insane demands all night, finally threw in the towel. It wasn't a gentle slowdown. It was a sudden, catastrophic seizure. The overworked muscle gave out in a final, spastic beat. Kyle slumped forward, his face landing in his open textbook. His roommate found him the next morning, surrounded by a small mountain of empty cans, a silent monument to his fatal study strategy. He had died in his quest to pass a test, but in the end, he received a failing grade in the one subject that truly matters: basic survival. 10. What is the most extreme thing a man will do to impress a woman? Would he write a poem? Fight a rival? Or would he, as our next hero did, decide to go head-to-hand with one of nature's most notoriously efficient eating machines? We find ourselves on a picturesque riverbank in Brazil, the perfect setting for a romantic afternoon. A young man, let's call him Ricardo, was with his girlfriend, enjoying the tranquil scenery. But Ricardo wasn't content with tranquility. He needed to be magnificent. He needed a grand gesture to prove his manliness, his mastery over the wild. And then he saw it, the flash of a silver fish in the water, a piranha. To any sane person, the sight of a piranha is a signal to keep one's limbs out of the water. To Ricardo, it was an opportunity. His brain bypassed all rational thought and went straight to, "This will be an amazing story." He turned to his girlfriend and uttered the legendary phrase that so often precedes a disaster. "Hey, watch this." Ignoring her nervous pleas, Ricardo waded into the river. His plan was as simple as it was moronic. He was going to catch the piranha with his bare hands. He was going to become a legend. He stalked his prey with the focus of a jungle predator, his eyes locked on the fish. He lunged, his hand plunging into the water. And then, a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. He actually did it. He pulled his hand from the water, holding a wriggling, angry piranha. He held it up for his girlfriend to see, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. He was the king of the river. The piranha, however, was not impressed with his performance. It did what any cornered animal with a mouth full of razor blades would do. It bit him. Hard. It was a small wound, but it was all that was needed. The first drop of Ricardo's blood hit the water, and in that instant, the river's entire social calendar was cleared. That single drop of blood was a dinner bell, an invitation sent to every piranha in a 100-yard radius. The calm water around Ricardo's legs suddenly erupted into a boiling, thrashing frenzy. It wasn't just one fish anymore. It was the entire school, arriving for the buffet. Ricardo's triumphant grin vanished, replaced by a mask of sheer, uncomprehending terror. His grand gesture of dominance had turned him into the main course. The attack was swift, brutal, and overwhelming. The shock and catastrophic blood loss were almost instantaneous. His girlfriend could only watch in horror as the man who wanted to be a hero was deconstructed by a swarm of his tiny, ravenous fans. He had succeeded in his mission. He caught a piranha. But in the process, he also achieved the rare distinction of becoming fish food while still alive. A tragically effective end to his short-lived career as a romantic daredevil. All right, time for some brutal honesty. I know you haven't tried a scorpion duel, but which of these 10 stories made you think, "That's dangerously close to a mistake I could see myself making"? Drop the number in the comments. This is a judgment-free zone. Mostly. If this catalog of chaos reaffirmed your will to live, deploy a tactical strike on that like button and subscribe for more essential survival guides.